Hi everyone, and welcome back to Stefan Livera podcast, brought to you by Bold. Joining me today is the author of The Sovereign Child, Aaron Stupple. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Stefan.
So Aaron, let's talk a little bit about this whole thing. Maybe we'll start with a little bit background on yourself, right? Like about your journey of being a parent and what, I guess, drove you to go and write this book.
Sure. So I live in upstate New York, or grew up in upstate New York, and on the East Coast in the U.S. And I was always had an amateur interest in philosophy, and got interested in various schools of philosophy over the years. While I was a teacher, high school science teacher for a while, and then I went to medicine. So I'm a practicing internal medicine doctor, and I kind of bounced around from school of thought to school of thought, and eventually I got very interested in the ideas of David Deutsch. He's a Oxford physicist. He's famous for essentially laying the foundation for quantum computing, but he also is a well-known philosopher, developer of philosophy of science, but not just of science, really philosophy writ large. And he is a devotee, a follower, a student of the Karl Popper school of philosophy, and Popper was an epistemologist. So his big topic was the theory of knowledge and the philosophy of knowledge. And your audience will be obviously aware of Friedrich Hayek, and he and Hayek were buds, and so there's a lot of overlap between their different outlooks. And nonetheless, through David Deutsch and his kind of elaboration or development of the ideas of Popper, Deutsch has a theory of childhood, basically. And he was actually a founding member of this school of thought called Taking Children Seriously, which is unique. It was mainly popular in the 90s and the early 2000s, largely in the UK. And it's since kind of petered out. But when I had my first kid, I discovered these ideas, and David Deutsch had been very influential to me. And then I had the question of, was I really going to apply these ideas to my own kid? And the short story is yes. And now we've got 5 of them. The oldest is 7, and me and my wife are really on the same page, which is an extraordinary blessing. And so, kind of embodying these ideas of David Deutsch's ideas with Taking Children Seriously. There's some other folks involved in this school of thought as well, most notably Sarah Fitzclarage. You can find her. She's done several podcasts, and she's working on a book of her own. But largely, the presence of these ideas was very small online. And as I was tweeting about them more and more, and basically made the decision to write a book. And that's how we got to here. It had some,
Gotcha. And I guess also in terms of your influences, as I was reading now, as I wasn't able to finish the whole book because I was busy with BTC Prague the last week or so. I think I got about 75-80% of the way through, so most of it. As I kind of read from your intro, I think you also kind of were influenced by other sort of libertarian kinds of ideas, like the sovereign individual and things like this as well. So can you explain a bit of that as well?
Yes, and I left this out of the book almost completely from an overt sense, but the way I see it is that this is a libertarian...
like an undertone for you, yeah.
Yeah. So I should also mention my collaborator before going too far, Logan Chipkin. So he's a good friend. He's the editor for this, and also he understands. He introduced me to libertarianism. Basically, he understands the philosophy deeper than I do, and so he was able to make sure all the arguments really land. It's not just me kind of shooting from the hip, and yes, and so I see this book as really a libertarian approach to childhood, to parenting. It's a bold claim, but that's what we're claiming. It's a freedom maximizing view on parenting, but it's not a view of neglect. That's the real key here. It's not saying you're on your own. I don't have any responsibilities for you. Instead, the parent is deeply obligated, but at the same time does not need to be imposing authoritarian practices.
I see. Now, people in this, let's say in this, while we're in this niche, they might be familiar with, let's say, peaceful parenting and this kind of idea by Stefan Molyneux and I think some other people. So where would you place your book in relation to that?
I would say it's unique. So I think basically all views on parenting essentially come down to a question of where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line? Which things do you allow and which things do you disallow? And different schools of thought prefer that line to be closer or farther away from authoritarianism, basically. Molyneux, quite far from it. And but in the end, almost everybody says, you have to draw the line somewhere. You have to set firm boundaries somewhere. Kids need structure. They need limitations. And the arguments go from there. You can't just let the kid run off into the street. You can't let them just use drugs, et cetera, et cetera. So there need to be some firm boundaries. But, most people, I would say for this audience, they value autonomy. They value freedom. They want their kids to have freedom and autonomy. They want them to be, self-assertive and all the rest. But that has to be within a reasonable structure. And that's the typical argument, which I was quite persuaded of myself. And what this book does, what this philosophy does, is say that that's actually not the best question for parenting. There's a better question than where do we draw the line? And the better question is, how do we resolve the problem that we're having in a way that supports your safety, your health, etc., but doesn't involve me controlling things. It doesn't involve me deciding what the outcome will be. That doesn't come down to, at the end of the day, myself being the authority. And that is...
okay. And so I guess before we sort of go further as well, the same kind of ideas, like people will sort of want to understand what are your results,
Right.
I wouldn't listen to a fat personal trainer. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I want to know how, and listeners will probably want to know how are things going with your 5 children so far? Yeah.
The short answer is it's going terrific. The other answer is that I also think that is a mistake, no offense. Yes, you wouldn't listen to an overweight trainer, perhaps, but an overweight person can know good exercise technique, right? They can know a lot about healthy diets. Whether or not they apply them themselves doesn't tell you about the state of the knowledge in their minds. The truth or falsity of what they know depends on whether it's true or false.
For sure. For me, I'm not saying it's wrong because they're fat. Right. I'm saying, just for obvious credibility reasons, yes, you as the person looking at them should think, well, why do they have credibility? That's more what I'm saying. It's not, of course, a fat personal trainer can tell you, eat healthy, get a good night's sleep, and lift weights and all these things.
Exactly.
Right? They could say that, and it might be the right thing to do, but you're gonna, if you, the outside observer, have to look and choose between, okay, a fat personal trainer and one who seems in shape. Now, okay, it could also be that the one who seems in shape is like abusing steroids or whatever, right? But it's more just like people want to know that you have either correctly done something. Otherwise, you could just be someone who's just talking. And how do you know?
Right. I would say it's a good, useful heuristic. It's a quick criticism to say, okay, well, this person, right, their family is in disarray. Their kids hate each other. They're fighting all the time, right? If my kids were doing terribly, that would be a great reason to say, I'm not even bothering with this book. I got, other things to do with my time. But yes, I would say, everybody is a big fan of their own kids, but things are going extraordinarily well. People remark that our home is peaceful. Our kids are polite. They don't seem to have strange compulsions with things like screens and cookies and food and ice cream, even though all those things are available in abundance. They have unfettered access to everything in the house. In fact, we buy them. If the kids are into cookies, we'll buy those cookies and make sure we have enough of them on hand. A lot like, if you had guests coming and you knew that they preferred, certain foods, you would make them available, even if you didn't think that they were good foods to be eating. So yeah, I would say things are going very well. Again, that was another part of this. It was going so well. In the beginning, we had lots of fears about this. Like, wow, let them sleep whenever they want, whenever they're tired. Let them eat, as much ice cream as they want. If they want to have, 2 bowls of ice cream, let them go for it. My wife and I had a lot of misgivings around this. Now we have 0, and it is so clearly a peaceful, pleasant way to be that that was a big inspiration for writing it down.
Okay, sure. So, I mean, obviously, it's going to be a bit out there, and people are going to, and I think even from a libertarian perspective, it kind of depends on your specific you, because for some of us, libertarianism is more like, it's specifically a statement about private property as opposed to sort of just broad kind of ideas of, total autonomy, let's say. That, it could be totally consistent for a person to, let's say, be libertarian from a legal theory perspective, but maybe a conservative in the home, let's say, things like this. But let's hear from you. What are some of the reasons or some of the ways you found, not, let's say, imposing some form of discipline on your children that have, caused them to be, let's say, well-adjusted children?
Yeah. We could just take politeness. I really want my kids to be polite, right? It's not like I don't care about the outcomes. I care deeply. I think politeness is very important, courteousness, etc., and respect. The question is, what is the best way to help a kid, right? I think the role of the parent is to help them understand this, not to simply act this way, right? And if you are producing certain behaviors, but the understanding is confused, or if a kid is behaving in the way that I want, but they're doing it because they're afraid of me, that's not the outcome I want. I don't think that's the outcome most people want. What you really want is the kid to be polite because they understand why being polite is a good idea. They understand the norms of politeness. They might not understand them explicitly, but they understand that people respond better when you pause to interrupt their conversation, when you say things like please and thank you. And the rules of politeness are extraordinarily subtle and nuanced. And if I force my kid to say thank you, if I force them to say, it's like, this is crucial. This is there's no discussion about this, right? For your own good, I need to make sure that you say thank you every time. And, you need to apologize every time you cross the line, right? If that is extremely important for me, it's even more important for me that my kid understands why. And when I force them to say please and thank you, part of their understanding is that, well, I say please and thank you so that dad doesn't give me a hard time, right? I say please and thank you to appease my father, not to express genuine gratitude. And so I think that gets at the heart of it, that when you force things on kids, you confuse their understanding of what these things are for. And, jumping to a libertarian perspective, right? It's that, we're all solving our own problems within our own unique circumstances in our own way. We're all figuring this out as individuals, and no third party can understand the nuances of the problems of our problem situation better than we understand them ourselves, right? So as adults, right, we recognize that, a third party wants to impose regulations or somehow get involved in my transactions. Well, they don't really know what I'm after. And so not only is that morally wrong, but that's also degrades the value of what we're transacting, right? If you're making it hard for us to have this transaction, well, then that's we're having to do extra work to get around you to deal with your confusion about what we are actually doing here. And so I think the same fundamental thing is happening with kids, that a kid getting a present from grandma and grandpa has the problem of, how do I express thanks? How do I express gratitude? And if I jump in there, I'm going to pause. Let's say to say thank you, you're reading the other person's body language, right? You want to see if your thanks have landed, right? And so you want the kid to be paying attention to the person they're thanking or the person they're apologizing to. And you don't want them to be paying attention to, again, some third party. So that's a quick stab at it.
I see. Yeah. And so can you explain a bit, maybe at a more general level, as you said, this idea of taking children seriously? I think that's probably the heart of this, isn't it?
It is.
That, I guess most people would be of the view that, okay, look, kids have not developed yet. They need to be taught things like, okay, manners, what's the right way to treat other people, don't hit other people, don't take their stuff, certain social elements of how we play with them or trade or talk with them, or even, self-management things like how do we manage our own diet and our body and sleeping at a certain time. So can you explain for us this broad idea of taking children seriously and why, why that is your chosen approach here?
Yeah. So again, the title is from Deutsch and Fitzclarence, and they kind of picked it. They had to, like, it was hurried. I don't know. They were doing something and they needed to have a title for this thing, so it was the best they can come up with at the time. But I think it's a really terrific title because what you're taking seriously is the kids' reasons. And I think that is the heart of this, is that we dismiss kids' reasons for why they're doing what they're doing. Adults, we are in tune to their reasons, right? That we understand the reasons are everything, especially, loved ones in our lives, right? If my wife is doing something I don't like, doing something strange or something risky to herself or to her health or whatever it is, my first thought is, what's going on? What are you thinking? How come you're right? If she's suddenly drinking a lot or using drugs, it's not, you can't use drugs in our relationship. It's like, holy cow, what happened to you? Why are you suddenly interested in drugs? And I think the same thing applies to kids, even more so, is that, if a kid is being rude, you want to understand their reason for being rude, and to correct it. You want to correct the reason more than the behavior. And I guess that's the whole thing, that the reasons are more important than the outcomes. The outcomes can be, you have time to fix that. It's childhood. There's years here, right? The kid has time to become, to have manners and become polite. In the moment, if they don't understand what I'm sorry is, if they're 2 years old, if I just say, like, I don't care what your reasons are, I'm going to make you say I'm sorry, then you're doing another thing. What you're doing is you're giving them a reason that's unconnected with regret, right? If you give them make sure you apologize, say you're sorry, you're giving them fear, you're giving them anxiety about their dad, you're giving them reason to be a little bit on guard when their dad is around. The thing is, kids, like adults, are always constantly generating reasons for how the world works and for what they're going to do next. And that process is not able to be controlled. That process is, the foundation of freedom, that we are all individually generating reasons all the time. And again, an external person cannot know what our reasons are exactly, and they cannot know what reasons we're going to develop in the future. So if I limit your access to cookies, the kid is going to start thinking up reasons. Maybe maybe he's a jerk. Maybe cookies are poison. Maybe cookies, if you eat too many cookies, maybe I'm a bad person, right? Maybe I'm a bad kid for wanting too many cookies, right? These reasons are going to pop up in their minds, even if we're imposing rules. And I would say, especially if we're imposing rules, part of their reasoning is going to be about how to get around you, how to deceive you, the parent, how to present a false persona to you. So taking children seriously is taking their reasons seriously, and the question is, how do you deal with a reasoning being? How do you deal with a brand new baby, right? A almost completely ignorant, helpless being who is generating their first reasons about the world. That's an awesome prospect.
This episode is brought to you by CoinKite, the makers of my favorite Bitcoin hardware wallet, the Cold Card Q. Now, some people think self-custody is too hard, but it's really about taking responsibility for your Bitcoin wealth and understanding that self-custody gives you a true feeling of liberty. The Cold Card Q has a full keyboard and big screen. It's got 2 secure elements and a true air gap, allowing you to go fully air-gapped using QR codes from seed generation to transaction signing. You can power the device using 3 AAA batteries, so you don't even have to plug it into the wall for power. You can easily use it with Sparrow Wallet for PC or Nunchuck on mobile, and you can dial it into the right level of security and complexity that you choose. If you want a simple setup, just use 12 words and single signature. If you want passphrases, easy. If you want to add multi-sig or co-signing features, you've got those too. So go to coinkite.com, use code Livera to get 10% off on your cold card or other devices and level up your self-custody today. This episode is brought to you by Galloy, builders of banking software for the Bitcoin age. After years of risk and uncertainty, Bitcoin and banking are colliding. The regulatory environment is rapidly shifting in favor of Bitcoin and digital assets. Fintechs and crypto-native companies can become chartered banks, and traditional banks and credit unions will launch Bitcoin products. But the legacy core banking software that many financial institutions run on wasn't built for Bitcoin. The Galloy banking infrastructure stack delivers all the key elements of a modern core banking platform, with cloud-native infrastructure, event-based architecture, and robust APIs coming together to meet the security, scalability, and reliability needs of banks of the future. Whether you are launching a modern financial institution from the ground up, or you are adding Bitcoin-backed lending or payments to your product offering, talk to the team at Galloy. Visit galloy.io or reach out to the team at biz@galloy.io. And as you say, with the taking the reasoning seriously, I think what you talk about in the book is things like, ways to make it fun or ways to sort of give them a fun alternative. So maybe you want to elaborate a bit on your approach there, because I think probably most people or most parents, they might have a concept of, let's say, discipline and also addressing the reason. So I don't know, in different households, maybe that means the kid's in timeout. In other households, maybe it's a slap on the wrist and here's what you did wrong and here's what you should do right, and also addressing the reason. So can you explain a bit, what does it look like to actually address the reason from your perspective?
Yeah. I use brushing teeth is like the easiest example for me. And again, these things are all mundane, but there are deeper ideas behind all of these. And so brushing teeth, many parents would say, if they want to promote autonomy, right, they're encourage them to brush their teeth. The kid doesn't want to brush their teeth, they'll tell them why you have to, right? There's an explanation there. And I think that's great, except for at the end of the day, regardless of whether you agree with my explanation or not, the kid's brushing their teeth. That's the conventional view. And explanations like that often basically come across as getting a talking to, right? Nobody wants an unwanted lecture. And so instead, as taking their reasons seriously, I would say, why do they not want to brush their teeth, right? And I try to understand the problem from their perspective. Understanding it's limited. I can't understand it perfectly from their perspective, but I can make some guesses myself, right? Maybe they don't like the taste of the toothpaste. Maybe they don't like the feel of the toothbrush. Maybe they just don't like this kind of forced nature of this. So one way of addressing this is to say, hey, let's go to the store, right? We go shopping together all the time, and I let them pick out their own toothbrush. And there's tons of different types of toothbrushes, and suddenly it's their project, right? It's their they've got
ownership of it now, yeah.
Right? And so they are understanding, the role of a toothbrush, what the toothpaste is, that their preferences matter, that they have, certainly agency here, but also fun adds to it, right? It's not like I'm saying, here's what I want you to do, but, you at the end of the day, you do whatever you want. Instead, it's perfectly valid or perfectly reasonable to make brushing teeth fun. I don't think there's anything manipulative about that. Certainly you can be manipulative in that regard. But what we do is we make a big deal about how brushing your teeth makes your breath smell nice, which is true. So my wife and I will breathe our freshly brushed teeth breath at each other, and we'll swoon and we'll make a big game out of it. Some of the kids love that. Other kids that don't, you try a different game. But in that context, brushing teeth is understood as this pleasant thing that my parents do. It makes my teeth smell nice. I get to use this, this toothpaste that I like the taste of, right? So everything about that in the kid's mind is about the actual situation of brushing one's teeth. And it has nothing to do with an adversarial relationship with their mom or dad, right? So I've done two things. One thing is that everything about teeth brushing is real, right? It's about taste. It's about the feel of the brush in your mouth. It's about how your breath smells. That's actual true knowledge about the world. And I don't have any adversarial issue going on here. I have no confusion about being forced to do this or that by mom or dad. I've given the kid no reason to think that dad's a pain in the ass, or that, I'm bad for not brushing my teeth, etc. And I would say that really gives you a picture of the whole thing. There's kind of two parts of it. One is taking no for an answer when they say no, and trying to modify things. What are they saying no about? Is it this? Is it that? Is it the taste? Is it the right? And just keep on trying new things. And the other thing is, how can I make this appealing? How can I make this appealing in an honest way? Right? If I would brush my teeth every day because I don't want my breath to stink, right? Like these are concepts that can be made fun and made appealing in their own sense and have a kid opt in voluntarily. And that's the magic. Can you create, for all the norms in the world, if they're really important, that means they work. Like politeness works. The rules of the road work. Language, right? The rules of language, the constraints of language work. So if they work, they're helpful, they're useful, and a kid will want to opt in. And your job is to open these worlds up to them in a fun, inviting way. Say, if eating this way is great, then we're going to make this really appealing to you. We're not going to force you and badger you and punish you into eating well because, right? That right there is a good reason to be suspicious. If something is so great, why do I have to be forced to do it?
I see. Yeah. So it's I guess an approach of finding ways to make it engaging for the child, a way to make the child feel like he or she has some choice and they are choosing to do it for themselves. I guess the common question that a lot of people will have at this point is, well, what about providing some sense of structure or rules for the child? Maybe a common example, and you were touching on this earlier, and I think you touched on it in the book. Okay, let me phrase the question this way.
Yeah.
The parents may be listening thinking, look, if I let my kid choose whatever they want, whenever they want, my boy is going to eat ice cream and cookies every meal of the day. Is that a problem? How do you, what do you find in your experience? And I know you touch on this in your book.
So there's two ways to look at this. One is if you take a kid that's been food restricted and screen restricted, right? And you open up the floodgates and give them sudden unfettered access, they're probably going to binge for perhaps weeks at a time. And that's its own issue. And I could talk about that. But I think that is primarily a problem that has been created by a life of restriction, right? And so putting that aside for now, if you start from the beginning, and our kids have started from the beginning. We got them iPads as soon as they were interested in them. They all have their own iPad. And again, we have, all the food that they like to eat is available in abundance. That said, my kids don't just eat nothing but ice cream. One of my kids will eat quite a bit of ice cream, but he's not eating only ice cream. He's eating some other things. So some days it might be all ice cream, but he's not sitting on the floor just like eating the whole bucket of it. He's not overweight. He understands how much is too much, right? Not on an intellectual level, but just on a visceral level, because he has always been the person who determines what he eats, basically. What he eats has never been mediated by a third party. And like I said, every mediation by a third party is a confusion. He doesn't have any confusion about food. And so one notable thing, the kids wanted a gumball machine. So I bought this gumball machine, and it comes with a whole bag of gumballs. And he sat down and just ate like piece of gum after piece of gum after piece of gum, chew it, swallow it, chew it, swallow it. He ate the whole bag, and then he went and puked. And that was it. I didn't say a word. I didn't say, it's going to make you sick. I didn't, he got to the point where it made him sick. And he almost never eats. We go to the store and buy candy. They buy bags of candy all the time. They never eat the full bag of candy. They get sick of candy the way I do, because candy is nauseating after, like, the nice thing about lollipops is that it is gross after 3-4 lollipops. Your mouth feels raw. And they've all had that experience of eating,
of overdoing it. Yeah,
of
sure.
overdoing it. They
but
know
what
exactly.
About in examples? So the obvious example, I mean, I'm sure people are thinking about this too. It's what I'm thinking about, because it's what I'm thinking about, to be clear. what about when it's like something really dangerous that you can't afford for them to make that mistake? You know, like
Right.
the kid shouldn't be playing with a chainsaw or playing on the edge of a cliff. You know, like the just obvious
Absolutely.
sort of. They're not going to get the chance to make that mistake in a small way before it seriously injures or harms them or kills them.
Exactly. So your job is to how do I help you do what you're like? What are you after? Again, taking their reasons seriously. So if you're running out in the street, that's a classic example. Do you just let your kid run out in the street? And no, I don't. I grab them and I drag them. I force them away from out of the street, right? Although you would do the same for your friend who is stumbling toward a cliff, right? You tackle him to the ground. Is that coercion? That's not. That's saying, I'm saving your life, and you're happy that I did it once you realize what I did, right? Your reason is confused. You don't understand the danger that you're in. And so with kids, they're often in danger in ways that they don't understand. But the question is, the conventional view is, well, then I have to make a rule. The rule is no running in the street. And that's what I'm objecting to. I'm not gonna let my kids run in the street, but it's not because I make a rule. Instead, I say, what's attracting you to the street, right? Often the kid wants to run in the street because parents run after them, right? So we need someone to chase you around. Let's get you in the backyard and I'll chase you around in the backyard, right? I will, you want to play with the car, let's go over to the car and, climb around in the car and play with the car. So it's not about, and then I put a fence up so that, the street is not readily available to my kids. But the fence has a gate and, it's not locked. Like if they're not imprisoned in the yard, but if they go through the gate, then I know to pay attention here and, talk to them about what I'm worried about if they go through the fence, and now we're careful about the cars. So their awareness of cars, I think, is at least as good or not better than other kids who are protected from cars, right? If the car is this evil, dangerous thing and there's no rule about no going in the street, well, then you are blunting their understanding of the cars and traffics and the risks. You're also giving them reason to think that you're a buzzkill. You're giving them reason to think that they are bad or deficient in some way. They have this desire for running in the street, and that's a bad thing. It sets up all these problems. Instead, I try to correct for those problems, and in the event that we are close to the street, I'm paying very close attention to them to make sure they understand what's going on. And if they do run in the street, I'm going to grab them. So it's, yes, I'll stop there.
The lead sponsor of this show is Bold, the best place to buy, sell, and save Bitcoin. For listeners in the US, Bold lets you secure your financial future with complete peace of mind by integrating a low-fee, Bitcoin-only brokerage with next-gen multi-sig vaults. With Bold, you can smash buy Bitcoin or set a DCA plan for only 0.99% fees and seamlessly deposit the Bitcoin direct to your Bold vault. The Bold Vault is a 2 of 3 collaborative multi-sig where you hold 2 keys and Bold holds 1 as a redundant backup, protecting against loss or theft. You can use Trezor, Ledger, or Cold Card hardware wallets to spin up a Bold Vault in just a few minutes, and the Bold Vault is the only collaborative custody vault available with 0 monthly fees. They're also offering 0 fees on your first $10,000 of Bitcoin buys and $25 of free Bitcoin when you buy $100 of Bitcoin or more. Try Bold today and upgrade your stacking experience over at getbold.io. And now, back to the show. Yeah, okay. And so then what about things that are not immediate? Things that are like, and I think in the book you also do talk about things like, okay, a common thing nowadays is things like limiting screen time for children.
Oh, yeah.
That's like a common thing that, people say, hey, I don't want to raise an iPad kid. Like that's kind of, that's kind of a common thing. You'll hear lots of parents say that because they're worried about the so-called algorithm that gets, people addicted to this sort of whatever, cocoa melon or whatever it is. What's your view on this kind of concept around screen time and addiction and these things?
Yes. I think the short answer is I think it's nonsense. I think we are victims of some very bad ideas about screens. So why is that? Another way to look at this is to say, managing your own preferences, managing your own interests, that is what life is, right? Like you and I, we wake up and we're constantly making trade-offs. We're constantly reorganizing. As we discover new things, those move up high, and then that has to push something else down. And in any given moment, something that was minor becomes major. And that is how we author our own lives. And our kids will become adults that do the same thing. And what kids are doing is they're not just managing their preferences and priorities, they are building out the tree of preferences. And many preferences conflict. Ice cream conflicts with being thin, right? Watching the iPad conflicts with, having a good relationship with your grandmother, let's say. And so the question is not what are the best priorities, right? Any libertarian would understand that, right? Like, no central authority tells us how to manage our preferences. And I think that's even more important for kids because they're learning not only what they prefer, but they're learning that they're the author and they're learning that they're the ones that move these around. And so and when you introduce food, sleep, all of these things are the context in which you discover and develop and elaborate and modify your preferences. And so what you pay attention to is, I would say, like the most sovereign act, right? I would say if I was worried that my kids would grow up to be, fearful and obedient to authorities, I would try to control what they pay attention to. That would be this idea that, anyway, I'll stop there. So I think what kids watch, I think the content is, children's content is nauseating to most adults because we already know this stuff, right? When a kid's watching Coco Melon, this is the first time they've seen, characters interacting, these shapes and colors and sounds and songs and whatnot. This is all new to them. And so they are indulging in this amazing digital content that is virtually free. How wonderful. The iPad is the greatest thing for childhood, I think, since the last greatest thing. And so if a parent is trying to control screen time, you're introducing all the problems I was talking about before. Somebody else gets to be determinative of what you pay attention to. Certain things that you like are actually bad. You're not to be trusted around interesting stuff. You have some vulnerable inner nature that needs to be policed by somebody else. The algorithm is out to get you. I mean, I can go on, and I could talk about each one of these individual things. It's a big topic, but
sure.
I'll pause you one last thing. Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
Since my kids have had unfettered access, they are like when their grandparents come to visit. Last weekend they didn't use iPads at all. They were just interacting with my parents because the iPad is not some forbidden fruit. We never take it away from them, but they put it down, they pick it up. It's in and out of their lives like my phone is. I'm not, glued to my phone. I use it when it's important to me, and then I put it away when something more interesting is around. And my kids function the same way.
I see. So I think in the end, it sort of comes down to more like what's guidance versus what is a hard rule. I think that's sort of, that maybe it's a sort of a distinction. I mean, because I'm sure there are, as you said, even with the road example, clearly we're not going to let our kids like just run on the road and get run over by the car. So obviously there's like some rule about that, or I don't know if you want to call it a rule, but we are just literally not going to, as long as we are able to see them and catch them before they run onto the road, both of us would do that with our children. So
right.
It's not really a difference there. It's more just like, what is the way that you guide them, and maybe how permissive you are about aspects of things like, okay, food or screen time or things like this, where I could imagine there are differences, or maybe, other people who have children listening, maybe they have slight differences on exactly how permissive they would be.
One thing is, I do force my kids, right? On occasion, I'll force them to do this or that. Getting in the car often, right? Like, I got to go and...
Right. Or if you're in the airport and you're about to take off, it's like the
definitely.
plane's going to go...
Those are easy.
It's not negotiable,
Right, those are not negotiable, but there's often... When I force my kids, it's a one-off episode. I never say, the rule is when I'm ready to go, you're at the door and you have to be paying attention and get in the car when I'm ready to go. Instead, I'll say, shoot, I wasn't able to prepare for this. Usually I can prepare them. Usually I get their clothes ready. I get ready myself a little bit early so we're not rushing out the door. I get them their iPads, right? Some snacks for the car. And like, it's fun. Like, let's go with dad. Oh, dad's going off somewhere, and they want to come with me. And there's no element of force at all. But sometimes I don't have the time to prep for that. and I just got to go, and they don't want to, and I just force them into the car, and they're screaming, and I'm holding them down, and I'm strapping them in the car seat. So I do that on occasion. But when I do it, I don't say, I explain to them or tell them that it's my failing, right? I didn't prep this for you. I'm sorry. You're coming with me, and I'm sorry. It's not about, and so it's a one-off. It's my fault. I'm not begging their forgiveness or anything. I just say sorry, which is just different than reprimanding and lecturing a kid that, you have to do what I say. When I say move, you move. And then it's not this recurring, rule. Every time we leave the house, you get your shoes on, and right. If we're going off to school or wherever we go on a regular basis, it's not the expectation. Instead, I say, what was my failing that they didn't voluntarily get in the car, and how do I tweak things so that next time they voluntarily do get in the car?
I see. Yeah. One other interesting topic I noticed was this idea of wanting the child to be open with you so that you understand and you can catch things out early. I found that interesting. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah.
Why is that important, and how do you achieve that?
So I'd say it's trust, right? Parents will say, and you talk about outcomes, right? Let's say I was, you want your kid to be healthy, you want them to be safe, et cetera, et cetera. How much do you want them to trust you? And issuing controlling rules will degrade trust. And the reason why it will degrade trust, if there's only so many cookies, if there's only so much screen time, then when you impose rules on a kid, you establish yourself as a gatekeeper. And gatekeepers, kids cannot help but think of reasons to get around the gatekeeper, right? To conceal things, to deceive, to lie, etc. And so whenever you present yourself as an adversary who will, even if you're not taking away their iPad, even if you're not controlling their food, if you might control their food, simply be in the presence of somebody who might decide on a whim, seemingly to you, again, to take their reasons seriously. For the kid, the ignorant kid, when a rule lands that they don't understand, it appears arbitrary, and it might even appear to be personal. And so when somebody is arbitrarily controlling you, it's very reasonable for you to not trust them, right? And to tell them things that they want to hear, to certainly to lie, to deceive, and to create this false persona. And this was extraordinarily clear to me with my daughter. She didn't want to do first grade. She did kindergarten, but when first grade came along, she didn't want to do it. And we wanted to make sure that she understood as best as possible what she was opting out of here. So we arranged to have her visit the class. And so we went for 20 minutes. She and we go to the school, but she didn't want me to leave her. And so I was with her the whole time. We go in the classroom, and these are her friends from kindergarten, right? She hadn't seen them in a long time. And she was like joining in with them. And then they went out to recess, and she was playing around on the playground. And I thought for sure she was going to stay and like, yes, I'll do first grade. And all the adults and the kids were all saying, oh, you're going to stay? Oh, it's so great to see you. We're so happy you're here, because she missed the first couple of days of school. Are you going to stay tomorrow? Are you going to stay tomorrow? And she basically kind of shriveled up into a little, because it was so obvious that they were pressuring her. And she shook her head meekly and said, yes, she was going to come back tomorrow. And we walk out of the building. And as soon as we go out the door, she said, Daddy, I said yes, but I wanted to say no.
Right.
And like, it just broke my heart. And I said, you never have to tell me something that you don't think. You never have to put on a false face for me. And I think that's just absolutely precious for the safety reasons, right? For the health reasons, for all the other reasons. I want her to learn how to read and learn math and be productive and have a career, right? But to get those things, my strategy is that she trusts me. She has no reason not to trust me. I'm never her adversary. I'm always on her side. Right? Those people in the school were manipulating her. They were trying to get her. And you could see a life of school is a life of learning how to play ball, learning how to make people happy, learning how to appease adults to the point where you don't realize you're doing it. It's all unconscious. And I think that is the root of being insecure. It's the root of being, having this kind of crippling self-awareness. You're policing yourself constantly in the eyes of others. These are the things we don't want, right? This is, and I feel like this is, well, anyway, the false persona is devastating, because if a kid's hiding something from you, you'll never know, right? There's no drugs. There's no, you can't eat unhealthy food, no seed oils, right? Well, the kid is going to deceive you. You're never going to know about the seed oils that they have successfully hidden from you. And they got nothing to do all day but to think up new ideas. They're extraordinarily creative. They got all day to think about it. And if you are always their adversary, they have a reason. And it's not just the food, right? If you were controlling food, what else might you control, right? A kid doesn't compartmentalize control in one domain and say, oh, but my dad is totally chill about everything else, I'm sure, right? One area of mistrust makes you generally mistrustful of a person. So I see trust as the ultimate safety, the ultimate lifeline. If I've got my kids' trust, then they will be open to my suggestions. And if they can always opt out, if I always take no for an answer, then they are much more interested in what I have to say. If I'm afraid of something, my kids are deathly afraid of it, almost pathologically. I'm saying, I have to temper myself and say, I was just kind of kidding. I'm not that afraid of that thing. They are very responsive to my view on things because there's no false persona. I'll stop there.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So, I guess let's sort of, summarize the key points as I've understood them then. So it's really, as you're saying, it's this idea of taking them seriously, having an approach of trying to engage with the underlying reason for something, trying to find alternatives that are, fun or engaging. But I guess maybe the areas where I probably disagree, or it's maybe more just like, what is the level of where you would be permissive or where you would, I don't know. But I do find it interesting, some of the stuff you present about things like screen time and addiction, and maybe the term addiction is being a bit overused.
Oh boy.
I think wanting the child to be open with you, the parent, is also an interesting one. I've seen that kind of when I talk to even my wife or other friends, that kind of idea that they relate even with their own parents, and how open they were. So I guess just kind of summing things up, do you have any final takeaway for people, and where can they find you online?
Yes. So, you're not trying to give you a hard time. You went with the, like, where do we draw the line? I still don't quite see where we draw the line. And what I'm trying to, it's not easy. What I'm trying to say is that we just abandon that, right? And instead, rely on trust. And I'm going to develop such a strong bond of trust with my kid that they will be open to my ideas. And if they're not, if they don't get it, well, then I can figure out something in the short term to make sure that they're safe. Like if they're climbing on the table, I can do some modification, right? If I can't get them to, I'm not going to make a rule that there's no climbing on the table. Instead, my job is to say, all right, well, how do we make this fun? I'll put some padding around the table, or I'll play with you on the table, so I'm there in case you stumble, and then modify it from there. But summing it all up, I don't know. I would say a big, the light bulb for me with libertarianism was COVID, like so many people, and everybody's got their COVID story. But my light bulb moment was the idea of, my grandmother and, other people's grandmothers would have different ideas about how much to isolate. And, right, some people would were very safety conscious, and other people thought, what, I'm old. It doesn't matter, right? I don't have much to lose. I don't want to miss out on a year with my grandkids, and that nobody can know what is the best choice for that person. It depends on their value structure, and with kids, we want them to create their own value structure. I think that's just that would be the summative statement on it. But the book is free, so the PDF is free. It's thesovereignchild.com for the links to Amazon. There's an audiobook, and also I'm on X. I'm a Stupple on X, and my collaborator Logan Chipkin also is on X and findable. That's where we yammer about things.
Okay, well, yeah, look, I think it's an interesting book. I've got to finish the last part of it after this, but thanks for joining me, Aaron.
Thank you so much, Stefan. I really appreciate it.